Temporary marriage, $500,000. Deal? Bryony Ashford read the note for the 17th time, and the words remained just as absurd as the first. Her hands trembled as she held the cream-colored business card with embossed gold lettering, Kingsley Wakefield, CEO Wakefield Industries. Below it, a phone number and that insane phrase scrawled by hand, "Be my wife for 6 months." 2 days ago, Bree had arrived at the tiny apartment she shared with her best friend, Harlow, clutching the manila envelope like it was carrying a bomb. The call from St. Mary's Children's Hospital still echoed in her ears. "Your younger sister, Clementine, finally has a compatible donor. The surgery can be scheduled, but we need $450,000 by the end of the month to cover all the procedures." $450,000. Bree made $2,200 a month as a waitress at Maison Azur, an upscale restaurant where men in $3,000 suits left $50 tips like they were crumbs. She had $3,147 in her bank account and a mountain of medical debt that already consumed every spare penny. "Are you going to call him?" Harlow had asked, staring at the note with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Of course not. The guy is obviously a maniac. Or one of those eccentric millionaires who collects temporary wives like their cars." But then came the question that wouldn't let her sleep. What if it's real? Now Bree sat at the tiny kitchen table, the phone in front of her like a dangerous reptile about to strike. It was 11:47 p.m. Harlow had gone to bed hours ago, but sleep was impossible. She remembered that man perfectly. Kingsley Wakefield had walked into Maison Azur last Thursday, with the posture of someone who owns the world. Tall, perfectly styled black hair, an angular jaw that seemed carved from marble, and those amber eyes that had cut through her with the delicacy of a laser beam. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. He'd ordered the filet mignon rare and still water. He didn't smile once. He left a $200 tip in that damn note. Bree had thought it was a pickup line from a bored rich guy. She threw the number in the trash, pocketed the money, and moved on with her life. But then came the call from the hospital, and suddenly that piece of paper at the bottom of the trash can transformed into an impossible lifeline. She had retrieved it, smoothed out the creases, and now here it was. Her phone lit up with a message from her younger sister. "Bree, Dr. Patterson said if I don't have the surgery soon, I might only have 4 more months. But it's okay. I know you're doing the best you can. Love you." Tears burned her eyes. Clem was only 16 years old. 16 years old with a defective heart that pumped at half the efficiency it should. Since their parents had died in that accident 3 years ago, Bree was all that Clem had, and Clem was all that Bree had. $500,000, 6 months. The math was simple and terrible. With that money, Clem would live. Without it, Bree would go to 20 more job interviews, be rejected for 10 more loan applications, and watch her baby sister fade away. Before she could change her mind, Bree dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice. Ms. Ashford. The male voice on the other end was deep, controlled, and there wasn't even a hint of surprise. "I was expecting your call." Bree swallowed hard. Her heart pounded. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things. The relevant question is, are you calling to accept or to negotiate?" The arrogance in that voice made something burn in her chest. But then she thought of Clem, her sister's fragile smile, the tubes and monitors keeping her alive. "I need details. Is this real? Why the hell would you make a proposal like this to a complete stranger?" There was a pause. Bree could hear the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "I have my reasons, and they're none of your business. You only need to know this. $500,000 deposited in your account the moment we sign the contract. 6 months of marriage, a few public appearances, no physical intimacy required, absolute discretion. At the end of 6 months, an amicable divorce, and you never have to see me again. This is insane. It's a business transaction, Ms. Ashford. I need a temporary wife. You need money. We both benefit." Bree closed her eyes. I need $550,000, she said, surprising herself. And I want $50,000 up front tomorrow. She expected him to hang up, expected anger, refusal. Instead, he laughed. It was a low sound, almost appreciative. You have nerve, waitress. Fine. $550,000 with $50,000 tomorrow. Meet me at my office at 2 p.m. to sign the papers. Don't be late. And then he hung up. Bree stared at the phone, her heart racing, her hands shaking. What have I just done? The Wakefield Industries building pierced the Manhattan skyline like a glass and steel dagger. 53 floors of corporate power that made Bree feel microscopic as she stood on the sidewalk, staring up. She'd worn her only professional outfit, a navy blazer with a small coffee stain she'd tried to hide with a scarf, and black pants that were slightly too short. Next to the impeccably dressed executives flowing in and out of the revolving doors, she looked exactly like what she was, a waitress pretending to belong. It's just a business meeting, she told herself. You've faced worse. That was a lie. She'd never faced anything like this. The lobby was all marble and intimidation. A security guard directed her to a private elevator that required a key card. The receptionist on the 47th floor, a woman with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, told her to wait. Bree sat on a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, her leg bouncing nervously. She checked her phone. 1:58 p.m. At exactly 2:00 p.m., the receptionist's phone buzzed. Mr. Wakefield will see you now. The office was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Central Park that made her breath catch. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, all clean lines and dark wood. And behind a massive desk sat Kingsley Wakefield, looking even more formidable than she remembered. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't smile, just watched her with those unsettling amber eyes as she crossed the room. You're punctual, he said. Good. I value punctuality. And I value not wasting my time, Bree shot back, surprising herself with her own boldness. Is this real, or am I about to be the punchline of some sick joke? One corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Sit. It wasn't a request. Bree bristled, but sat in the chair across from him, keeping her spine straight, refusing to be diminished. Kingsley slid a thick folder across the desk. The contract. My lawyer drafted it yesterday. Read every word before you sign. Bree opened the folder. The document was dense with legal language, but certain phrases jumped out. Marriage in name only. No conjugal rights or expectations. Public appearances as required, minimum twice monthly. Complete confidentiality agreement. $550,000 payment structure. Why? She asked, looking up. Why me? Why any of this? Kingsley leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, studying her like she was a chess piece he was considering moving. My grandfather, he said finally, controls 70% of Wakefield Industries through a family trust. He's dying, and he's decided that before he transfers control to me, I must be married. He believes marriage demonstrates stability, maturity, commitment, all the things he thinks I lack. So get actually married. To whom? His voice dripped with disdain. The social climbers who see dollar signs? The board members' daughters angling for position? Everyone in my circle wants something, you're different. I want money. Exactly, you're honest about it. This is a transaction. Clean, simple. No feelings, no complications, no expectations beyond what's written in that contract. Bree looked back at the papers. There was something almost sad about his cynicism, but she pushed that thought away. This wasn't about feelings. What about your grandfather? Won't he expect, I don't know, grandchildren? A real marriage? He'll be satisfied with the ceremony and seeing us together a few times. He has 6 months, maybe less. After he's gone, we divorce quietly and everyone moves on. The casual way he discussed his grandfather's death made Bree's stomach turn. But then she thought of Clem, and her judgment softened. Everyone had their reasons. "I need the $50,000 today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today." "Already arranged." He pushed a paper across the desk. "Bank transfer. The moment you sign, it processes. The remaining $500,000 comes the day after our legal marriage ceremony." Bree picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. This was insane. She was about to legally bind herself to a stranger. A cold, arrogant stranger who saw her as a convenient solution to his inheritance problem. But Clem's face flashed in her mind, her sister's weak smile, the beeping of hospital machines. She signed. Kingsley took the contract, added his signature with swift, decisive strokes, then pressed a button on his phone. "It's done," he said to whoever answered. He looked at Bree, and for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt? Regret? It vanished too quickly to tell. "The ceremony is Friday. Small, private, just witnesses and an officiant. My assistant will send you details." "Friday? That's 3 days away. Problem?" Yes, it was a problem. She'd just agreed to marry a man she didn't know, and suddenly it was becoming terrifyingly real. "I need to tell my sister something," Bree said quietly. "Tell her you've met someone. Tell her it's quick because I'm traditional. I don't care. Just keep the financial arrangement confidential." Bree stood, her legs shaky. She needed to leave before the reality of what she'd just done crushed her completely. "Ms. Ashford," Kingsley called as she reached the door. She turned. "Don't mistake this for anything other than what it is. We're strangers entering a business arrangement. In 6 months, we'll be strangers again." "I'm counting on it," Bree replied, and walked out. In the elevator, her phone chimed. A notification from her bank. Deposit, $50,000. The tears came then, hot and overwhelming. Relief, terror, grief for the life she'd just sold for 6 months. She pulled out her phone and texted Clem. "Got the money. Scheduling your surgery. You're going to be okay." The response came immediately. "OMG, Bree, how?" Bree stared at the message. How could she possibly explain? "Met someone," she typed. "Tell you everything soon. Just know I love you." As the elevator descended, Bree caught her reflection in the polished doors. She looked the same, but everything had changed. In 3 days, she would become Mrs. Kingsley Wakefield. The thought was absolutely terrifying. Friday arrived with cruel sunshine, as if the universe was mocking the farce Bree was about to commit. She stood in the dressing room of City Hall, staring at her reflection. The dress wasn't hers. Kingsley's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Petra, had it delivered yesterday. Cream silk, simple but elegant, fitted perfectly despite Petra never taking her measurements. It probably cost more than Bree made in 6 months. She felt like a fraud. "You look beautiful," Harlow whispered, adjusting Bree's hair. Her best friend was the only guest on Bree's side, sworn to secrecy with a story about a whirlwind romance. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Bree thought about Clem, currently in pre-op at St. Mary's. The surgery was scheduled for Monday, fully paid. Her sister would live. "I'm sure." The ceremony room was aggressively bureaucratic. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, a bored officiant who'd probably done 6 weddings already today. 2 of Kingsley's associates stood as witnesses, both in expensive suits, both regarding Bree with undisguised curiosity. And then there was Kingsley. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it was crafted by angels. His expression was unreadable, those amber eyes fixed on her as she walked down the short aisle. No music, no flowers, no pretense of romance, just a transaction. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began in a monotone voice, clearly reading from a script he'd memorized decades ago. Bree barely heard the words. Her heart hammered so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. Kingsley's hand was warm when he took hers for the ring exchange. Simple gold bands that probably came from the same jewelry store that supplied all the quick City Hall weddings. Do you, Kingsley Thaddeus Wakefield, take this woman? Thaddeus? She almost laughed. Of course, his middle name was Thaddeus. His voice was steady when he said, I do. No emotion. No hesitation. And do you, Bryony Catherine Ashford, take this man? This was it. Last chance to run. To grab Harlow's hand and bolt from this insanity. But Clem. Always Clem. I do, she whispered. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The room fell silent. Bree's eyes widened. She'd somehow forgotten about this part. Kingsley leaned in, his hand touching her waist with careful precision. Professional, distant. His lips brushed hers for exactly 2 seconds, barely a kiss at all, more like a contractual obligation fulfilled. Yet something sparked. Just for that instant, Bree felt heat flood through her, her breath catching. Then he pulled away, his expression unreadable. Congratulations, the officiant said, already moving toward his next appointment. The reception was at Kingsley's penthouse, a sprawling space overlooking the city that made Bree feel like she'd stepped into an architectural magazine. Everything was sleek, modern, and utterly impersonal. No photos, no mementos, just expensive furniture arranged with geometric precision. Your home is very clean, Bree said, accepting a glass of champagne from a caterer. About 20 people milled around. Business associates, she assumed. No one seemed particularly interested in celebrating. I prefer minimalism, Kingsley replied, standing beside her but not touching. Even now, as supposed newlyweds, he maintained careful distance. Your belongings will be moved to the guest suite tomorrow. Excuse me? You didn't think you'd continue living in that apartment, did you? My grandfather expects us to live together. Your friend Harlow will need a new roommate. Panic clawed at Bree's throat. Moving in? She'd known it was part of the arrangement, but the reality felt suffocating. I have a life, Kingsley. A job. Friends. I can't just... You have $500,000. He interrupted quietly. Which, if I recall correctly, was the point of all this. The restaurant has already been informed you've resigned. You what? Bree's voice rose. Several heads turned. Kingsley's jaw tightened. He took her elbow, steering her toward a private balcony. The moment they were alone, she yanked her arm away. You had no right. I had every right. Read the contract, Bryony. Public appearances. Living as a married couple. Complete commitment to the arrangement. You signed. Don't talk to me like I'm one of your employees. Then don't act like you didn't know what this entailed. They glared at each other, both breathing hard. This close, Bree could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that made her head spin. I needed that job, she said finally, her voice cracking. It was mine, the one thing I controlled. Something shifted in Kingsley's expression. For a moment, he looked almost sorry. You'll receive a monthly allowance equal to triple your previous salary, he said quietly. Consider it compensation for your time. I don't want your money. I mean, I do. But, she pressed her hands to her face. This is all happening so fast. Kingsley was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. I know this isn't ideal, for either of us. But we made an agreement. 6 months. We can manage 6 months of coexistence. Bree looked out at the city, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. Somewhere down there, Clem was being prepped for surgery. Her sister would live because of this choice. Guest suite? She asked finally. Opposite end of the penthouse from my room. You'll have complete privacy. And I can visit Clem whenever I want? Of course. And you'll be... civil? The corner of his mouth twitched. I'm always civil. No, you're always cold. There's a difference. He studied her, and for the first time Bree saw genuine curiosity in his eyes. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Yeah, well, you're exactly what I expected. Arrogant, controlling, emotionally constipated. Emotionally constipated?" Now he definitely almost smiled. Did I stutter? This time he did smile. Small, brief, but real. It transformed his face completely, softening the harsh angles, lighting up his eyes. Bree's breath caught. 6 months, he said, extending his hand. Business arrangement, nothing more. Bree looked at his hand, then took it. His grip was firm, warm. Nothing more, she agreed. But as they shook on it, both of them knew it was already more complicated than that. Living with Kingsley Wakefield was like living with a ghost who paid all the bills. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Bree had seen him exactly 11 times. Always brief passings in the hallway, a few strained breakfasts where they read separate newspapers, one awkward dinner that lasted exactly 23 minutes. He left for work before dawn and returned after she'd gone to bed. It should have been perfect. Privacy, luxury, distance. Instead, it felt lonely. Bree spent her days at the hospital with Clem, whose surgery had been successful. Watching her sister's color return, hearing her laugh again, it made every uncomfortable moment worth it. But she couldn't tell Clem the truth. So she'd invented a fairy tale. Met Kingsley at the restaurant, instant connection, whirlwind romance. "He must really love you," Clem had said yesterday, squeezing Bree's hand. To help with all this, the guilt had nearly crushed her. Now, standing in Kingsley's massive kitchen at 11 p.m., Bree made herself tea and tried not to think about the lies she was building. The penthouse was too quiet, too empty. She'd never felt more alone while surrounded by luxury. "Can't sleep?" Bree spun around, nearly dropping her mug. Kingsley stood in the doorway, wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. She'd never seen him in anything but suits. The casual clothes made him look human, approachable, dangerous in an entirely different way. You're home early," she stammered. "It's almost midnight. That's not early." He moved to the espresso machine with practiced ease. "How's your sister?" The question surprised her. He'd never asked before. "Good, really good. The doctors say she can come home next week." "That's good." He seemed unsure how to continue the conversation. They stood in awkward silence, the espresso machine hissing. "You know, for a married couple, we're terrible at this," Bree said finally. "At what?" "Coexisting, talking, being in the same room for more than 5 minutes." Kingsley took a sip of his espresso, regarding her over the rim. "We're not a real married couple. I know that, but your grandfather doesn't." She set down her mug. "When am I meeting him, by the way? Isn't that the whole point?" Something dark flickered across Kingsley's face. "Soon. He's having a difficult week." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You didn't sign up for my family drama." "Actually, I kind of did." Bree pulled herself onto the kitchen counter, letting her legs swing. "That's literally what I signed up for." He almost smiled. Almost. "You're nothing like the women I usually encounter," he said quietly. "You mean I'm poor?" "I mean you're real." He set down his cup, and something in his voice made Bree's heart skip. "Everyone in my world wears masks, performs. You just exist. Honestly. That's a fancy way of saying I have no filter." "It's a compliment." They looked at each other across the kitchen, and the air felt charged. Bree noticed things she'd tried not to notice. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the definition of his arms under the t-shirt, the intensity in those amber eyes. This was dangerous territory. "We need to practice," she blurted out. "Practice? Being a couple? If we can barely talk in private, how are we going to convince your grandfather?" Kingsley considered this, then nodded. "You're right. What do you suggest? Tell me something real about you. Not business Kingsley. Just Kingsley." He looked uncomfortable, like she'd asked him to strip naked. I don't do personal. 6 months, remember? You're stuck with me. Might as well make it bearable. She tilted her head. Come on, one thing. What's something nobody knows about you? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I wanted to be an architect. His voice was barely above a whisper. Before my father died, and I had to take over the company. I used to sketch buildings constantly, design hotels, museums, bridges. He laughed bitterly. Grandfather called it a waste of time, said Wakefields build empires, not buildings. Bree's chest tightened. There was such naked pain in his voice. Do you still sketch? No. There's no point. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. He looked up sharply. It's reality. We don't always get what we want. No, Bree said softly. But we can hold on to the things that make us who we are, even in small ways. Kingsley stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shuttered immediately. My grandfather wants to meet you. Tomorrow. Dinner at his estate. Bree's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? He's having a good day. Those are rare now. Kingsley's voice had gone cold again, professional. The moment of connection vanished like it had never existed. Petra will prepare you. Dress code is formal. We leave at 6. Kingsley, get some sleep, Bryony. He walked past her, pausing at the doorway. And thank you for asking. Most people don't. Then he was gone, leaving Bree alone in the massive kitchen, her tea gone cold. She sat there for a long time, thinking about a man who built empires instead of buildings, who surrounded himself with expensive things but lived in emotional poverty. This is just business, she reminded herself. Don't get attached. But as she finally headed to bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the loneliness in his voice when he talked about his abandoned dreams. She recognized it because she heard the same loneliness in her own voice every day. Maybe they weren't so different after all. And that thought was more terrifying than any contract. The Wakefield estate looked like it had been ripped from a Gothic novel, all stone and ivy, and windows that gleamed like watchful eyes. Bree's hands were slick with sweat despite the car's air conditioning. Breathe, Kingsley said beside her. He'd been silent the entire hour-long drive. He's just a man. A dying man who controls your entire future. No pressure. Our entire future. For the next 6 months, anyway. The limousine stopped. A butler opened the door, and suddenly there was no more time to prepare. Inside, the estate was museum perfect. Oil paintings, antique furniture, the smell of old money and older grief. Kingsley's hand found the small of Bree's back, guiding her. The first time he'd voluntarily touched her since their wedding kiss. It felt right. That was the problem. Kingsley. The voice came from a sitting room. Don't hover in the hallway like a servant. Bring her in. Archibald Wakefield sat in a leather wingback chair, oxygen tubes in his nose, but his spine was straight and his eyes were sharp as broken glass. He looked exactly like Kingsley would in 50 years. All angles and intensity, a face carved by refusing to bend. Grandfather, Kingsley said, his voice carefully neutral. This is my wife, Bryony. Those sharp eyes turned to her, dissecting, cataloguing, judging. So, the waitress who captured my grandson's heart. His voice dripped with skepticism. Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. Bree felt Kingsley tense beside her. She could play it safe, be meek, confirm whatever suspicions the old man had. Or she could be herself. With all due respect, Mr. Wakefield, your grandson doesn't seem like a man whose heart is easily captured. She met his gaze directly. Which is exactly why I fell for him. Archibald's eyebrows rose. A wheezing sound emerged from his chest. Laughter. She has spine. Sit, both of you. Tell me how this happened. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as a meal. 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last, while Archibald peppered them with questions. How did they meet? When did Kingsley know she was the one? What were their plans for children? They'd prepared for this. Petra had drilled them on a cover story. But Archibald was shrewd, probing for inconsistencies, watching their body language. "You don't touch," he observed during the 4th course. "My late wife and I couldn't keep our hands off each other, even after 50 years. Kingsley's jaw tightened. Bree made a split-second decision. She reached over and took Kingsley's hand. His head snapped toward her, surprise flickering in those amber eyes. But he didn't pull away. His fingers curled around hers, warm and solid, and something electric shot up her arm. "We're still adjusting to being married," Bree said smoothly. Everything happened quickly. "Too quickly," Archibald countered. "Makes me wonder what you're hiding." "We're not hiding anything," Kingsley said, and his thumb traced an absent circle on Bree's palm. Was he even aware he was doing it? "I met Bryony and I knew. Sometimes you just know." The way he said it, looking at her with an intensity that felt too real. Bree forgot to breathe. Archibald watched them, his expression unreadable. "Kingsley, I need you to review some documents in my study. Business matters." He waved a dismissive hand. "Your bride will keep me company." Panic flashed across Kingsley's face. "Grandfather." "Now, boy." Kingsley squeezed Bree's hand once, a silent apology or warning, then left. The room suddenly felt smaller. Archibald fixed her with that penetrating stare. "How much?" "Excuse me. How much is he paying you?" No accusation in his voice, just curiosity. "I wasn't born yesterday, girl. My grandson marries a stranger weeks after I tell him marriage is required for his inheritance. The math isn't complicated." Bree's heart hammered. Deny it? Confess? What would damage Kingsley less? "Does it matter?" she asked finally. "You're getting what you wanted. Kingsley married. I wanted him happy. I wanted him to understand what matters in life before I'm gone." Archibald's voice cracked. "Instead, I've driven him to this farce." "It's not." Bree stopped. What could she say? It was exactly a farce. "I'm dying, Mrs. Wakefield. Cancer. Aggressive. I have perhaps 2 months. Maybe 3. He leaned forward, and she saw tears in those fierce eyes. "I wanted my grandson to know love before I left him alone in this world. Instead, I've turned love into a transaction, just like I turned his dreams into obligations." The pain in his voice was unbearable. "He talks about you," Bree said quietly. It wasn't true, but it felt true. "He respects you. Maybe too much. Maybe enough that he'd do anything to make you proud. Even marry a stranger? Even that." She met his eyes. "But I'm not what you think. Yes, I needed money. Desperately. But your grandson, he's not what I expected either. He's lonely, brilliant, trapped in a life he never wanted. And maybe this started as a transaction, but..." She stopped. But what? What was she about to say? Archibald watched her struggle with something like satisfaction. "You care for him." "I don't. We barely know each other." "You care for him," he repeated. "And unless I'm completely senile, he's starting to care for you too. Saw it in how he looked at you during dinner. Like you were a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. You're reading too much into this. Perhaps. Or perhaps 2 people pretending to be married might accidentally become something real." He smiled, sad and knowing. Stranger things have happened. The door opened. Kingsley returned, his expression tight. "Everything all right?" "Your wife is remarkable," Archibald said. "Don't screw this up, boy." "I'll try not to," Kingsley replied carefully. The drive home was silent. Bree stared out the window, replaying the conversation, Archibald's words echoing in her head. "You care for him?" She didn't. She couldn't. This was business. But then why could she still feel the warmth of Kingsley's hand in hers? Why did her heart race when he looked at her during dinner? "Thank you," Kingsley said finally. "For tonight. You were perfect. It was just acting." "Was it?" His voice was quiet, uncertain. When she looked at him, his expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Because it didn't feel like acting to me." Their eyes met in the dim car, and the air thickened with everything unspoken between them. Bree looked away first, her pulse thundering. 4.5 months left, she whispered. Right. 4.5 months. Neither of them sounded convinced anymore. The charity gala was a spectacle of wealth and artifice. Manhattan's elite preening in designer gowns and tuxedos, champagne flowing like water, everyone performing their carefully curated versions of generosity. Bree hated every second of it. The emerald gown Petra had selected clung to her body like a second skin. Diamond earrings, borrowed, not hers, weighed heavy on her ears. Kingsley's hand rested on her waist as they navigated the crowd, and she was hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched. 3 weeks since the dinner with Archibald. 3 weeks of increasingly frequent, accidental encounters in the penthouse. Morning coffee together. Late-night conversations in the kitchen. Kingsley had even shown her some of his old architectural sketches, his face lighting up in ways that made her chest ache. They were failing spectacularly at keeping things professional. Mrs. Wakefield, a woman in red silk, purred, approaching with predatory grace. Victoria Ashmont. I went to boarding school with Kingsley. Her eyes raked over Bree with undisguised disdain. I was so surprised to hear about the wedding. Kingsley always said he'd never marry. People change, Bree replied evenly. Especially when inheritances are involved. Victoria's smile was poison. Tell me, how does a waitress snag Manhattan's most eligible bachelor? You must have some very special talents. Kingsley's hand tightened on Bree's waist. Victoria, always a pleasure to remember why I avoid these events. If you'll excuse us. Oh, don't run off. I'm just curious about your little Cinderella story. Victoria sipped her champagne. Does she even know which fork to use? Something snapped inside Bree. She'd endured 3 hours of condescending looks, whispered comments, thinly veiled insults. She was done. You know what, Victoria? You're right. I was a waitress. I served people like you who treated me like furniture. I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation and ate ramen for dinner because I was saving every penny for my sister's medical bills. She stepped closer, her voice steel. So no, I don't know all your stupid social rules, but I know how to work 12-hour shifts without complaining. I know what real problems look like, and I know I'm worth 10 of you, designer dress or not. The nearby conversation stopped. People stared. Victoria's face flushed crimson. Well, I see why you two are perfect for each other, both utterly classless. Let's go, Kingsley said quietly, taking Bree's hand. They didn't speak until they were in the limousine. Bree's hands shook with adrenaline and mortification. I'm sorry, she whispered. I just embarrassed you in front of everyone. You were magnificent. She looked up. Kingsley was staring at her with an expression that made her heart stop. Admiration, heat, something dangerous and thrilling. Victoria is a viper who's made my life miserable since we were teenagers. She needed to be put in her place. He leaned closer, and Bree could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. You didn't embarrass me. You defended yourself. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Kingsley. Her voice came out breathless. Everyone I know is afraid of losing money, status, approval. You're not afraid of anything. That's not true. I'm terrified right now. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of how I feel when you look at me like that. But before she could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shattered. It's the estate. He answered, listened, and the color drained from his face. We'll be there in 40 minutes. He hung up, staring at nothing. Kingsley? My grandfather collapsed. He's asking for us. His voice was hollow. They don't think he has much time. Archibald Wakefield looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and machines keeping him tethered to life. But when they entered, his eyes opened and found Kingsley. Boy, he rasped. Stop hovering in the doorway like you're at a business meeting. Come here. Kingsley moved to the bedside, and Bree saw his hand shake as he took his grandfather's. The armor had cracked completely. I'm sorry, Archibald whispered. For all of it. For making you give up architecture. For treating love like a business requirement. For dying before I could fix any of it. Don't. Kingsley's voice broke. You're not dying. You're stubborn. You'll outlive us all. Kingsley. Archibald's grip tightened. Let yourself be happy. The company, the money, the legacy, none of it matters if you're alone. His eyes found Bree. Keep him human. He forgets sometimes. I will, Bree promised, tears streaming down her face. And you, Archibald told Kingsley. That girl loves you. Real or not, whatever this started as, she loves you. Don't be too much of a fool to see it. Grandfather, you need to rest. Promise me. Promise you'll let yourself feel something besides obligation. Kingsley was silent for a long moment. Then, I promise. Archibald smiled, closed his eyes, and the machine's steady beeping began to slow. 3 hours later, it was over. Bree found Kingsley on the penthouse balcony at dawn, still in his tuxedo, staring at the city with empty eyes. You should sleep, she said softly. Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. His voice was raw. I never told him I loved him. Not once. I was too proud, too angry about the life he forced me into. And now he's gone. He knew. Did he? Kingsley turned to her, and the pain in his face was devastating. Or did I become exactly what he feared? Cold, closed off, incapable of love. That's not true, isn't it? I hired a wife, Bryony. I turned love into a transaction because I didn't believe I was capable of the real thing. Kingsley. And the worst part? He laughed bitterly. The absolute worst part is that somewhere in this farce, I started to care about you. Really care. And I have no idea what to do with that. The words hung between them, electric and terrifying. You're grieving, Bree whispered. You don't mean... Don't tell me what I mean. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. I know exactly what I feel, and it scares the hell out of me. They stood inches apart, the city waking up around them, everything balanced on a knife's edge. We have 3 months left, Bree said desperately. 3 months and then we go our separate ways. That was the deal. Screw the deal. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Tell me you don't feel this too. She should lie, should protect them both. But she was so tired of lying. I feel it, she admitted. God help me, I feel it. And then he was kissing her. Not like their wedding kiss, careful, obligatory, performed. This was raw and desperate and real. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, and the world narrowed to just this. His mouth on hers, his body pressed against her. 3 months of tension exploding into something that felt inevitable and terrifying and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kingsley rested his forehead against hers. What do we do now? He whispered. Bree didn't have an answer. Everything had just changed, and there was no going back. They didn't talk about the kiss. For 5 days after Archibald's funeral, they existed in a strange limbo, orbiting each other in the penthouse, sharing glances loaded with everything unsaid, but never addressing what had changed between them. Kingsley threw himself into work, arriving home past midnight. Bree spent her days with Clem, who was recovering beautifully, asking increasingly pointed questions about why Bree seemed so distracted. It couldn't last. They both knew it. The explosion came on a Thursday evening. Bree was making dinner, something she'd started doing, cooking elaborate meals that Kingsley rarely appeared for, when he walked in earlier than expected. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Bree's stomach dropped. Those 4 words never meant anything good. "Okay." Kingsley loosened his tie, a gesture she'd learned meant he was uncomfortable. "The will was read today. My grandfather left me control of Wakefield Industries, as expected. But there's a condition." "What kind of condition?" "We have to stay married for a full year, not 6 months, a year." He ran his hand through his hair. "If we divorce before then, control goes to the board, and I lose everything he built." The wooden spoon clattered from Bree's hand. "A year? But our contract—" "I know what our contract says." His voice was sharp. "Believe me, I'm aware." "So what are you saying? You want to renegotiate? Add more money?" Even as she said it, the words felt wrong. Money wasn't what this was about anymore. "I don't know what I'm saying." Kingsley's control finally cracked. "I don't know how to navigate this. Everything is complicated now. You're not supposed to be—" He stopped. "What? I'm not supposed to be what?" "Someone I care about." The words exploded out of him. "You were supposed to be a transaction, a solution, and somehow you've become the only real thing in my entire life, and I have no idea how to handle that." Bree's heart hammered. "Kingsley, do you want to know the truth? The real reason I made that insane proposal?" He laughed bitterly. "I saw you at that restaurant, and you smiled at everyone, real smiles. You made that place feel warm. And I thought, that's what I need. Someone who remembers how to be human." He looked at her with desperate eyes. "I told myself it was just practical. But I think part of me knew even then." "Knew what?" "That you were dangerous. That you could make me feel things I'd spent years burying." Bree's chest ached. She moved closer, reaching for him. But he stepped back. "Don't. If you touch me right now, I won't be able to think clearly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we've been thinking too much and not feeling enough." "Feeling?" His laugh was hollow. "I'm feeling everything, Bryony, and it's terrifying. I'm feeling grief over my grandfather, guilt for using you, fear that this whole thing will collapse. And worst of all, I'm feeling—" He stopped again. "What?" "Love." The word came out broken. "I think I'm falling in love with you, and it's the worst possible timing because you signed up for 6 months of pretend, not a year of something real." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Bree couldn't breathe. Everything she'd been trying not to feel surged up at once. "You think I'm not terrified too?" Her voice shook. "You think this is easy for me? I came here for money. That's not romantic, Kingsley. That's mercenary. And now I'm lying to my sister, lying to your grandfather's memory, lying to myself every time I pretend I don't feel something for you. Then what do we do?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. Clem's ringtone. "I have to," she answered. "Hey Clem, can I call you back?" But her sister's voice was wrong, scared. "Bree, there are people here, at the apartment. They say they're journalists. They're asking about you and Kingsley Wakefield, about some contract, about whether your marriage is fake." The phone nearly slipped from Bree's hand. "What?" "They say they have documents, bank transfers. They're asking if you married him for money." "Bree, what's going on?" Kingsley must have seen her face because he was instantly there, taking the phone. "Clementine, this is Kingsley. Lock your door. Don't answer any questions. We're sending security now." He hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Petra, we have a leak. Journalists at Bree's old address. Send security immediately." He paused. "Find the source. Someone had access to the contract." He ended the call and looked at Bree, his face ashen. "How did they—" "I don't know. The contract was confidential. Only my lawyer, Petra, and us." His jaw clenched. "Unless someone on my legal team talked." The implications crashed over Bree like a wave. If this gets out, the marriage looks like a sham. The board can challenge the will. Everything falls apart. And Clem? Bree's voice cracked. She's already fragile. If she finds out I lied, that I married you for money to save her, she won't. We'll fix this. How? Bree was shaking now. How do we fix this, Kingsley? The truth is I did marry you for money. That's not a lie we can spin. Then we tell a different truth. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. We tell them it started as an arrangement but became real. We tell them we fell in love. Because that's not a lie either, is it? Tears streamed down Bree's face. I don't know what's real anymore. This. He pulled her close, and she could feel his heart racing against hers. This is real. Whatever it started as, what I feel for you now is real. But what if it's not enough? What if the scandal destroys everything? Your company, your reputation, my relationship with Clem. Then we fight. Together. Bree wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that love could be enough. That they could weather this storm. But standing in that kitchen, with their carefully constructed world crumbling around them, she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been playing with fire from the beginning. And now, everything was burning down. Kingsley's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his face went dark. What? It's worse than we thought. He showed her the screen. A gossip website headline. Wakefield's contract bride. Documents reveal $550K marriage sham below it. Photos of them. Excerpts from their contract. Bank records. Everything exposed. Kingsley, I'm so sorry. Don't. His voice was cold again, the walls slamming back up. This isn't your fault. But the way he looked at her, guarded, distant, made her wonder if he really believed that. Or if, despite everything he'd said, part of him would always see her as the waitress who took his money and broke his heart. The distance between them felt like miles, even though they stood inches apart. And Bree realized with devastating clarity, loving someone wasn't enough if trust had already shattered. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Bree sat in Kingsley's office, watching him rehearse with his PR team. Cold, professional, every word calculated. He'd barely looked at her in the 3 days since the scandal broke. The plan was simple: deny everything, claim fabricated documents, threaten lawsuits, protect the company at all costs. It made Bree want to scream. "This is wrong," she said suddenly. Everyone turned. Kingsley's expression was unreadable. "Excuse me. This. All of it." She stood, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "We can't lie. Not anymore. Bryony, the legal team has advised—" "I don't care what they've advised." Her voice rose. "Your grandfather died begging you to be honest, to let yourself feel. And what are we doing? Building more walls, telling more lies, protecting money instead of protecting what actually matters." "And what matters?" Kingsley's voice was dangerous. "Please enlighten me." "Us." The word hung in the air. "We matter. What we have is real, Kingsley, but it'll never survive if it's built on lies." His PR director cleared her throat. "Mrs. Wakefield, I understand you're emotional, but—" "Get out," Kingsley said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Everyone out. Now." The room emptied in seconds. Suddenly, they were alone, the city sprawling below them, everything balanced on this moment. "You want honesty?" Kingsley's control finally shattered. "Fine. I'm terrified. Terrified that everything my grandfather built will collapse because I was arrogant enough to think I could control love like a business deal. Terrified that the board will destroy me. But most of all, I'm terrified that when the dust settles, you'll realize you were right to marry me for money, because that's all I'm actually worth." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Look what I've done to you. Dragged you into scandal, put your sister through hell, turned your life upside down. You saved my sister's life." Bree grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Yes, this started as a transaction. Yes, I took your money. But you gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that underneath all that armor is a man who sketches buildings he'll never design and cares so much he's afraid to show it. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't fall in love with your money, Kingsley. I fell in love with you. Bryony, his voice broke. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to that press conference, and we're going to tell the truth. All of it. The contract, the money, how it started. She smiled through her tears. And then we're going to tell them how I fell for a man who pretends to be cold, but melts when his wife makes him breakfast. How you fell for a waitress who calls you out when you're being emotionally constipated. They'll crucify us. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see what I see. Two broken people who found each other in the messiest way possible and somehow made it work. She took his hands. I'm not afraid of the scandal, Kingsley. I'm only afraid of losing you. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled, real and warm and devastating. You're insane. Probably. Still want to be married to me? More than anything. He kissed her softly. For a full year, and maybe longer if you'll have me. That depends. Are you going to start sketching again? Only if you promise to keep making me breakfast and telling me when I'm being an idiot. Deal. The press conference was chaos, but standing at that podium, Kingsley's hand in hers, Bree felt no fear. They told the truth about the contract, the arrangement, how desperation and loneliness had brought them together. And then Kingsley did something unexpected. I know many of you think this invalidates my grandfather's wishes. That a marriage that started as a business arrangement isn't real. He looked at Bree. But he told me something before he died. He said love isn't about how it starts. It's about what you choose to build. His voice grew stronger. I choose Bryony, not because a contract requires it, not because of inheritance or obligation. I choose her because she's the bravest, most honest person I've ever met. And if the board decides that's not good enough, then maybe I'm not the right person to run Wakefield Industries. The room erupted in questions, but Bree barely heard them. Because Kingsley was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Later, she found out that the leak had come from Victoria Ashmont, who'd bribed a paralegal. The board met, and surprisingly, voted to support Kingsley. Archibald's final wishes, combined with Kingsley's transparent honesty, had won them over. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. The moment that mattered was 3 days later, when Bree brought Clem to the penthouse and told her everything. Her sister listened silently, then hugged Bree so tight it hurt. You married a stranger to save my life, Clem whispered. That's the most Bree thing ever. You're not angry? I'm grateful. And also, I totally saw you guys falling for each other. She grinned. You're not subtle. That night, lying in Kingsley's arms, his real arms, in his real bed, no more separate suites, Bree finally felt at peace. So, she murmured. Husband, what now? Now, he kissed her forehead. Now we live, honestly, together. For better or worse? We've already had the worse. I'm looking forward to the better. And for the first time in her life, Bree believed in happy endings. 18 months later, the Wakefield Community Center opened on a crisp October morning. Kingsley had designed it himself, his first building, modern and beautiful, with a medical wing funded by the Clementine Ashford Foundation. Bree stood beside him, their daughter asleep in her arms, watching Clem cut the ribbon. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he corrected, kissing her temple. Their marriage had stopped being pretend the moment they chose each other. The renewal of vows, a real ceremony with real emotions, had happened 6 months ago. And now, watching her husband's dream made real, their daughter breathing softly, her sister healthy and thriving, Bree understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about perfect beginnings. It was about imperfect people choosing each other, again and again, through scandal and fear and doubt. It was about a billionaire and a waitress who met over a ridiculous contract and built something real. The end.